Hello and welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, your weekly dose of the top pro-life news and issues, all from a Catholic perspective. I'm Catherine Hadro in our Washington, D.C. studio. Thanks for joining us.
In this week's show, a pro-life woman is attacked by a male protester. We have the story. We are joined in our Washington, D.C. studio by Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin to discuss his family's adoption journey. And this. We introduce you to a Catholic musician who doesn't let blindness stop him from sharing his gifts with the world.
But first, after a contentious confirmation battle, Brett Kavanaugh has been sworn in as a Supreme Court justice. The U.S. Senate voted 50 to 48 on Saturday to confirm the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. The October 6th vote followed weeks of hearings and debate over Kavanaugh's record as a judge, and also allegations of sexual misconduct made against Kavanaugh dating back to the 1980s. The vote to confirm Kavanaugh marks the end of one of the longer Supreme Court confirmation processes ever held. Joining us now is Kerri Kupec, White House spokesperson, and Mallory Quigley, the Vice President of Communications for the Susan B. Anthony list. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us on.
Kerri, you have been working very closely with now Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Can you give us some insight into what these past few weeks have been like and where his mind is at this week as he takes the bench for the first time?
Well, these last few weeks were definitely intense, but I will say that now Justice Kavanaugh, he always had his eye on the prize. Obviously, we were battling some pretty serious things when you're dealing with false allegations of something as egregious as rape. It was rough, but I have to say, having worked so closely with him, I was constantly impressed by his demeanor, by his continued kindness. He always thanked us every day at the end of the day for our work. You know, when he knew we'd put in a long weekend, he would thank us.
Mallory, there's been a lot of discussion as to whether or not Justice Kavanaugh will be another vote to reverse Roe v. Wade at the Supreme Court. What would it take for that to potentially happen?
Sure. Well, I think, nobody has a crystal ball about what the future holds, but certainly with two Trump appointees on the court, I think we have seen a shift in the court, to one that could potentially put us in a situation where the states are able to pass laws that are reflective of the will of the people of those states. And that's what we want. We want a vigorous debate on what abortion law is in this country and abortion policy. And this whole process of getting justices appointed and confirmed on the court has really opened up a conversation about what are America's abortion laws. We're only one of 7 nations in the whole world to allow elective abortion after 5 months. And that Americans are very unhappy with that status quo, which has been forced upon us by the court in the Roe versus Wade decision.
What impact do you think this entire process will have in the upcoming midterm elections? It's less than a month away. What do you think?
Well, one thing I would say is, as things got worse over the last few weeks with respect to Justice Kavanaugh's process and just the absurdity of some of the allegations that were rolling in, we saw, at least from our perspective from within the White House, we saw that Americans really started rallying to his defense. They realized this was not only going too far, but this was a disgrace as far as how he was being treated by the Senate Democrats in particular. And I think, and I've seen all kinds of comments on Twitter and everything else that said, before I didn't even care about voting in the midterms, but now I would cry. There's one person in particular I saw said would crawl across broken glass after what they did to Brett Kavanaugh. And that, I think, actually, what, as horrible as it was, had this catalyst effect of sorts with certainly the president's base.
Mallory, is that what you're expecting?
Yeah, the Americans are more engaged than ever on this. And, in the last 2 months, I've been to 7 battleground states talking to voters specifically about Judge Kavanaugh. And what we've seen is that people are even more motivated than before. And we took a look at our survey response data from before and after the allegations, and really there was no change. In fact, in some places like Missouri, where Senator McCaskill came out weeks ago saying that she would oppose Judge Kavanaugh, support for him actually increased. And I think that's because people are tuning in like never before, and they see that this was just a terrible situation where, unfortunately, some extreme pro-abortion members of the Democratic Party were really trying to capitalize on the pain of a human being to take down one man.
I think it was a wake-up civics lesson, too. That's one thing I would add. I think a lot of Americans, honestly, including myself at times, forgets the critical role that the Senate plays.
Yes.
And then, so when all of America was watching these hearings play out in this pivotal seat, you know, on the Supreme Court, they suddenly realized, oh, wow, my vote really makes a difference with respect to the Senate, because this is hanging in the balance of a few senators' hands.
Right, and the Senate is where judges are confirmed. That's you know, and we have to have a strong pro-life majority in the Senate, not just a Republican majority, for future instances where the president's going to have the opportunity to put an appointee on the court.
The midterms are right around the corner. I know a lot of people are watching. Finally, abortion advocates really have painted Justice Brett Kavanaugh as anti-woman, associating him with these misconduct allegations. How should the pro-life movement, which truly is pro-woman, respond to this?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, we have a woman right here who worked with the man himself, and I think, you know, Kerri spoke very highly of him. It was so moving to me the way that he talked about his mom and how she inspired his entrance into public service. And, you know, he's the first justice to have all women law clerks as of this week. So that's really exciting. I'm sure you want to add more, Kerri.
Yeah, no, it is neat.
Yeah.
That he made history just today with the fact that he has 4 female law clerks. But, you know, he was on the second most powerful court, the D.C. Circuit Court, for 12 years. He had 48 clerks. The majority of those clerks were women. I think anyone has seen, you know, the stories, the news reporting. This is a great father. He loves his daughters. He loves coaching their basketball team. I witnessed his love for his daughters all the time. He's a great advocate and mentor for women. His former female clerks speak glowingly of him, and I think you know, and you can tell by how someone treats someone when in the bad times, when you see the people who come out for them. And what did we see? A couple of weeks ago, 100 women gathered here in Washington, D.C. to host a press conference, but not just women activists or you know, the people that we are used to, you know, working with all the time. These are women who personally knew him, including former high school girlfriends and past and present colleagues. And just one more story I would share that has really touched me with him is a family friend of theirs. The husband, the father in that family, he passed away from ALS, and one of his daughters is in school with one of Justice Kavanaugh's daughters. And apparently the school hosts a father-daughter dance each year. And not only did he take this, the friend of his daughter that one year, he continues to take her every year. So this is a man who respects women, who values women, and his life demonstrates that.
Kerri Kupec, spokesperson for the White House, and Mallory Quigley, Vice President of Communications for the Susan B. Anthony List. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
With less than 30 days left, the countdown to the 2018 midterm elections is on. While midterm elections historically have lower turnout rates, the stakes this year are incredibly high, and the pro-life movement needs to show up at the polls. With that in mind, here is this week's call to action. Go to prolifeweekly.com and pledge to vote pro-life this November. Once you get to prolifeweekly.com, you can enter in your name and basic information to sign this petition. Be sure to share with your friends and neighbors so they remember to keep life in mind this November. The pro-life issue is a foundational one. How a political candidate views the most vulnerable gives us a key insight into his or her values. Being pro-life must be a priority. We just saw with the recent Kavanaugh confirmation process how important each and every Senate vote can be. It's a reminder that we need pro-lifers to fill both the House and the Senate to advance the pro-life cause. With the clock ticking until November 6th, be sure to register to vote, educate yourself on your state's candidates, and go to prolifeweekly.com to pledge to vote pro-life. We go now to pro-life headlines from around the globe.
And she decided to kill her 3-year-old child.
Toronto police arrest the man accused of kicking a pro-life Canadian woman in late September. 26-year-old Jordan Hunt has been charged with assault for the incident captured on this video and faces charges related to an incident at a different pro-life event. The video, uploaded by LifeSite News, has over 3 million views. A pro-life Irish member of parliament quits his party because he said he felt isolated during the abortion referendum. In a press release, Peter Fitzpatrick implied the recent abortion referendum played a big part in his decision to leave the Fine Gael party, one that was historically pro-life, but whose senior ministers campaigned for abortion during the recent referendum. Over the summer, Ireland voted overwhelmingly in favor to repeal the Eighth Amendment, which protected the lives of both unborn children and their mothers. And Pope Paul VI will be canonized a saint on October 14th. The 20th century Pope wrote the encyclical Humanae Vitae, which reaffirmed the Church's teachings against artificial contraception. Both of the miracles that paved the way for Pope Paul VI's beatification and canonization involved unborn children. He will be canonized alongside Archbishop Oscar Romero of El Salvador.
Our next guest governs a state where only one abortion clinic still stands. He's been a pro-life leader and lives out his pro-life convictions too, as the father of 9 kids, including 4 adopted children. Here's a recent interview with Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin. Governor, thank you so much for your time and for being here.
It's great to be with you, it really is. Thank you.
Now, the state you govern, there was only one abortion clinic, but a judge just struck down a law that would have required that clinic have an agreement with an ambulance and a hospital in case of an emergency. Why did your administration think that law was necessary in the first place?
This law has existed in Kentucky for more than 20 years. It wasn't my administration that required this. It has been a law for 20 years, and it was a rather tortured interpretation of the Constitution that led this judge in an effort to accomplish what it was clear he wanted to, which was to allow this abortion clinic to stay open. He negated a law that has stood for a full generation in Kentucky. So he disregarded the law by saying that law, which has been there for 20 years under, largely Democrat rule, and nobody had a problem with it, and it has been applied and has been required of every single abortion facility in our state for decades. Now he said that this is no longer constitutional. That wasn't even the issue that was before him, but it was his justification for why, in fact, he said that it didn't apply. We will appeal it. It will go to the 6th Circuit. And if, in fact, the law matters, and I believe that it does, I believe we will win at the 6th Circuit level.
Well, we will continue to monitor the latest when it comes to the pro-life legislation, but I want to turn now, Governor, to your personal pro-life views and your family's witness. Can you give us some insight into you and your wife's journey into becoming adoptive parents? When did that journey begin?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to any life story, and ours is a large family. We have 9 children. 4 of them are adopted. We initially had 5 children. We decided to adopt 1 child. We did start that process, and indeed, in the course of adopting him, we learned of a sibling group of 3 others. They were siblings with one another. They didn't have a home. They were 10, 7, and 2. So the fact that they were older children, 3 together, it wasn't likely they would find a home. And once you already have 6 children, 6, 9, what's the difference? There's plenty of your viewers who appreciate this. 9 is a warm-up to some of the people that are watching this program. Absolutely. And I'll tell you, once you have more children than hands, I often say it's like the parenting equivalent of terminal velocity. You can fall from 10,000 feet, 1,000, 100. You hit a certain speed, and that's it. Once you have more children than hands, you're already there. You can add another kid, and the only thing that really changes dramatically is what you drive. And so we are blessed by a whole lot of just beautiful children. I mean, of all, races, genders, interests, curiosities, we're very blessed.
That's incredible. Both my husband and my mother are the youngest of 10, so I'm really appreciative of those big families. Were there roadblocks, though, on that journey of adoption that you were not expecting that you guys came across?
It's interesting if you go back farther still in our story. More than 10 years ago, we tried to adopt a young girl out of the foster care system in Kentucky. I had nothing to do with politics. Even now, this is the first political job I've ever had. But 10 years ago, long before I had ever been associated with the job I'm in or any other, I ran into this roadblock in Kentucky as my wife and I tried to adopt a girl who was 11 years old. She'd been in many different foster care homes. There was no one trying to adopt her. She was eligible for adoption. She wanted to be adopted. And after more than a year, thousands of dollars, intrusive fingerprinting and visits and interviewing of us and our children and home studies, and all of which are good to a point, but became just a big slug that we had to grind through. At the end of it, we were told, you know what, you already have 5 children, that's enough. It's better for this child to stay in the foster care system than to be the 6th child in a family because she won't get enough attention. This is what we were told. Wow. And I was just outraged at how wrong this was for this child. This young girl who's now a young woman, somewhere an adult, has aged out, and her life statistically has probably not turned out well. And what a shame that we as a society have failed so many children because of antiquated, outdated, counterproductive rules made to block adoption out of our foster care system.
That's heartbreaking. And Governor, you've worked on legislation just this year seeking to improve the adoption and foster care process in Kentucky. Can you tell us about that bill and what you're still hoping to accomplish?
We are in the middle of transforming the way adoption and foster care works in our state. In America, there are more than 400,000 children, about 437,000 children right now in the foster care system. In Kentucky, 9,500 of them, 2,400 of whom are eligible to be adopted and want to be adopted right now. But in Kentucky, it has historically taken almost 3 years from the time a person is eligible to be adopted and when the paperwork gets completed. And those are opportunity losses of time and emotion in development that you never get back. And so for me, if we can make Kentucky the absolute center of excellence for this and make it a model for others to follow. So we're trying to simplify the process. I wear this little button, a pair of scissors cutting through red tape. And my belief is that if we can just simplify the process, we are also making sure that we take better care of kids in the system now.
What's your message to parents who might be considering adopting?
Just do it. I mean, really, here's the thing. It's never easy. It's not, we were talking even before we went on air. Life is not, it doesn't come with a manual.
Right.
It's sometimes messy, but it's a beautiful thing. And it comes with complications, and it comes with joy, the likes of which could never be explained. I mean, to see my children adopted and biologically born to us, all crashing into the same bed at night and all snuggling in and all acting as if they came out as triplets or quadruplets or however many of them happen to be in there, it's just a wonderful thing. And I would say this, there are in the world about 167 million children who are orphaned in some way, shape, or form and need a home. In our responsibility as people of faith, as people who want to be the hands and feet of Christ, who truly want to be to the least of these what we have been instructed to be, it's our responsibility to reach out to the widows and the orphans and to be the solution.
Well, thank you for your witness and for the work, your good pro-life work in Kentucky. Governor Matt Bevin of Kentucky, thank you again for your time.
You're welcome.
When we come back. This Catholic musician doesn't allow his disability to stop him from sharing his God-given gifts. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Hadro. A man recently assaulted a young woman at a Canadian pro-life event, and it was captured on video. Here's this week's Speak Out segment.
If someone was raped and she gave birth and she decided to kill her 3-year-old child.
Marie-Claire Bissonnette, a young woman who participated in Canada's Life Chain event on September 30th, recorded this video. It's been viewed over 3 million times on LifeSite News' YouTube page. Bissonnette told the Toronto Star she started to record the man in the video because he was drawing over the pro-life protesters' signs and clothing. The man asks Bissonnette about abortion after rape and then proceeded to kick her. He defended his actions by saying that he intended to kick her phone. The Toronto Sun reported that the man in the video is Jordan Hunt, a hairstylist in the city who was fired by his employer after the video was posted online. He has since been arrested in connection to the incident and faces assault charges. This act of violence cannot be tolerated and needs to be condemned at every level. And note that this violence came from a man who is pro-abortion. And violence is, of course, what the pro-life movement stands in opposition to. Pro-lifers are on the side of women and on the side of peace. This man roundhouse kicking a young woman to the ground, a young woman who is speaking up for life, is the culture of death on full display. Our peaceful, prayerful protest is a powerful witness for life. And while standing up for life isn't always easy, it is necessary. And such displays of assault won't dissuade us from speaking the truth on life. But remember, there is something you can do to counter today's culture of death. Follow this week's call to action. Go to prolifeweekly.com and pledge to vote pro-life this November. This week, we introduce you to a man whose mother rejected pressure to abort him. Born prematurely and blind, this man is now a world-traveling musician who says he wants to be a fisher of men with his music.
This is no ordinary concert hall. It's a home. And this is no ordinary musician. Carlos Alberto Ibe has overcome a significant obstacle to share his talents with the world. After trying to have a baby for 10 years, Carmencita and Roman Ibe were thrilled to learn they were pregnant, but doctors didn't share their optimism.
I was very sick. See, that's why the doctor advised me to abort him, because they were afraid I might die. And it's the baby that is causing my blood pressure to rise, to be high. But I said he was not doing anything. Just leave him alone, because he was not doing anything. And then they told me, we're afraid that if he's born and he was premature, he will be like a vegetable and you will have more problems. I said, he's not doing anything, just leave him alone. So I'm glad they did.
Rejecting doctors' pressure to abort, the Ibes welcomed their son Carlos Alberto, who goes by Chucky, into the world. But being 3 months premature, Chucky weighed in at just over 1 pound and had retinal detachment, meaning he was blind. Born with a disability, his parents were grateful he was born at all. They watched him grow stronger and healthier, and when he was 2, watched in awe as their miracle son showed to be something of a child prodigy.
I discovered my interest to play the piano when I was 2 years old. You see, we had a small organ in the house, and I went up to it, and without looking for the notes, I just played a perfect rendition, according to my parents, of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star.
I noticed Chucky start walking and went to the organ. And that's when I caught. I said, what is he doing there? So I took a film of him so you could see that in the video. And then he made it and started to explore his hands on the keys. And that's when he started feeling everything. I heard the twinkle, twinkle. I said, oh, no. He must have done this maybe when we're not around or something. I told my wife, look what he's doing. And that's the start.
It was the start of what would become Chucky's passion and livelihood. The blind Catholic musician travels the world as an accomplished concert pianist and singer.
I've played, of course, in Italy, some parts of Italy, Spain, Russia, and I was blessed to play in Cuba.
His talents have reached the stages of New York's Carnegie Hall to performance centers in 5 continents overall. He's been able to speak the language of every country in which he's performed. In addition to English,
hello, everybody.
Chucky speaks 7 languages: French,
Bonjour tout le monde.
German,
Guten Tag, meine Damen und Herren.
Italian,
Buongiorno, signori e signore.
Spanish,
Buenos días, señoras y señores.
Russian,
Здравствуйте, дамы и господа.
Japanese,
Konnichiwa-san.
and Portuguese.
Boa tarde, senhoras e senhores.
But he's most fluent in music, which is what brought him to the Vatican and to meeting 2 popes, including a saint.
I told him to ask the Holy Father if he could pray that he could see. Never even ask anything about the sight.
When he approached me, we embraced, he gave me a rosary, and I told him that I would like to be a fisher of men with my music. When I met Pope John Paul, Saint John Paul now, since I love Chopin, I told him that I would like for him to pray for me to be the second Chopin.
John Paul II is one of the many saints Chucky has come to know and love.
I have a devotion to Saint Cecilia. Saint Cecilia is the patroness of music, and I have kindly asked her to be my piano teacher. I've also developed a strong devotion to Saint Anthony. Saint Anthony is now my most trusted voice teacher.
As Chucky leans on his heavenly teachers, his parents say his extraordinary life is a lesson of faith in and of itself.
When I found out that he was blind, of course I was devastated. I was really, really disheartened because I thought God was punishing me. I said, what have I done that you have done this? So I was telling the priest, and the priest said, why do you think the Lord is punishing you? Why don't you think that the Lord is hugging you and wanting you to be for Him alone? And that's why He gave you this. When He gave you something, remember, He will never leave you alone. And it's true. He never left us alone. Every time you will see the hand of God in everything that we do.
With the saints by his side, Chucky brings his gifts to concert halls around the globe and back to the one who gave them to him.
That'll do it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, but I'd love to hear from you before next week. Email me at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com or like my public page on Facebook so we can keep this pro-life conversation going. Remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.